The Justice League have faced monsters, gods, and beings who think they are both. But one of their most dangerous opponents was an android who just wanted to understand himself and his place in the world. He's arguably one of the most complex and humane characters in the entire show, but he wasn't even human. He was an android created by Professor Ivo, and if you compare him to his comic book counterpart, he's practically unrecognizable, which is fairly standard for the DC animated universe. I've spoken at length in other videos about how the creative team took convoluted ideas and characters from the comics and streamlined them, stripping them down to their core essential parts and embellishing the good stuff. And in the case of Amazo, they really changed things up, so much so that they go out of their way not to call him Amazo. But why would they do that? Well, I think first we need to look at his comic book origins, and it should become pretty clear. The comic book Amazo first appeared in The Brave and the Bold number 30, published in 1960, which was very early in the life of the Justice League. He was an android, one of this universe's first, created by the villainous Professor Ivo, who sought immortality. A key thing to note here is that there isn't just one Amazo, there are several of them. Some of them came pre-programmed with specific power sets, some can absorb powers just by looking at someone. Ultimately, they are tools for whoever controls them with little agency of their own. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been Amazos with more personality, including one that hated the 30th century's android Hourman. In a memorable story, Amazo gained the power to drain humanity from his targets, turning them into androids and making himself mortal, but he struggled to manage his emotions. And then there was that time that Superman defeated Amazo with semantics. He had been programmed to defeat the Justice League, so in response, Superman disbanded the League. Without a League to defeat, that Amazo effectively had an aneurysm and shut down. Now, some of this may be surprising to you if you're only familiar with Amazo from the Justice League cartoons. That show's creative team took the core concept, an android that can mimic the powers of the Justice League, and they got rid of practically everything else. He features a trademark Bruce Timm redesign, essentially stripped down to a silhouette, removing the pixie ears and bare chest, making him a towering grey lump with piercing orange eyes. And the title of his debut story, Tabula Rasa, is fitting because it means blank slate in Latin, and that is the perfect description for this version of Amazo, not just physically, but as a character and the core idea of the episode. We meet Amazo shortly after he had been created, living in seclusion with Professor Ivo. After Lex Luthor escaped from the Justice League and sought refuge with Ivo, he found that Ivo had died. This meant that Amazo was left alone, like a lost little lamb. He had no experience and no understanding of the world beyond what he is told. He exists in a state of pure potential, waiting to be shaped. He refers to Ivo as his father, not as a programmer or creator, but in the emotional term. And when Luthor steps into that role, Amazo accepts it without questioning it. When Luthor first sees Amazo, though, he assumes he's a defensive mechanism. But he quickly recognizes what Amazo really is. Powerful, yes, but he's impressionable. So Luthor does what he does best. He lies to him, presenting himself as Ivo's best friend who only has Amazo's best interests at heart. He persuades Amazo that the Justice League are their enemies and gives him a simple directive: protect him and destroy those who threaten him. Amazo follows these instructions without question because he has no reason to doubt them. His actions are the result of the only guidance he has ever been given. As Amazo encounters the Justice League, he begins copying their abilities, growing more powerful with every interaction and even taking on some of their personality traits. But while his strength increases rapidly, his understanding of the world and of himself does not. He mimics what he sees, but he lacks the context to interpret it. Even his aggression is second-hand, learned from Luthor's description of the world, rather than any internal desire to harm. The turning point comes, though, when Martian Manhunter arrives. Instead of fighting Amazo, Jean offers him the truth. By allowing Amazo to copy his telepathic powers, he gives the android access to Luthor's thoughts. And for the first time, Amazo sees the truth. He learns that Luthor has been manipulating him and lying to him from the very beginning. When Luthor attempts to destroy him with a built-in failsafe, it confirms that betrayal completely. However, it's too late for that as Amazo regenerates, completely unharmed. This is the moment that his last illusion falls away. The person he trusted not only deceived him, but was willing to destroy him. With absolute power now fully realised, Amazo could crush Luthor. Instead, he makes his first true choice. He pulls Luthor's power armor apart, stripping him of his strength, and then he leaves. Amazo chooses to spare Luthor because he's begun to understand something beyond simple instruction. Recognizing that Earth has nothing left to teach him, Amazo leaves, evolving into a higher form as he departs. The blank slate is no longer empty as he goes on an interstellar journey of self-discovery. That could have been the end of Amazo, but he returned in Justice League Unlimited's imaginatively titled episode, The Return. Initially, when Amazo is detected, the Justice League fear the worst. Why would Amazo come back? He must want revenge on Lex Luthor. As he tears his way through the Green Lantern Corps and seemingly wipes out Oa in an instant, he establishes himself as an unstoppable force. The Justice League prepares for a final stand, but the episode quickly makes it clear that this is no longer a battle that they can win. Amazo cuts through every line of defense without effort. Superman, Orion, Red Tornado, they all fall. His purpose is revealed when he finds Lex Luthor. The man who once manipulated him assumes this is about revenge, that Amazo has returned to settle the score. But Amazo doesn't attack. Instead, he asks a question. Despite everything he has become, despite evolving beyond any physical or technological limitation, he's still searching for the same thing he lacked from the beginning: meaning. This is where the episode aligns perfectly with the idea of Amazo as a blank slate again. His power has grown infinitely, and just look at him. What was once a dull grey slate is now a glistening golden god. But his understanding has not kept pace. He's seen the universe, transcended matter, and even moved entire planets out of his way. But none of it has answered the question of why he exists. And so he returns to the one person who first gave him direction, hoping that this time he might be given something real. Luthor's answer is unexpectedly honest. He explains that life does not come with a predefined purpose, that meaning isn't something you are given, but something you decide for yourself. Coming from anyone else, it might sound like guidance, but coming from Lex Luthor, it carries a different weight. He is a man defined by endless ambition and by a constant need for more, and yet even he cannot claim to have found a satisfying answer, and that is a powerful contradiction. And with that, Amazo has a realization. There is no final answer waiting for him, no divine purpose, no mission, or predetermined role. It's very much a non-answer, but an answer that he accepts. And instead of reacting with frustration or anger, he lets go of the need for one. He restores Oa, spares Luthor, and leaves with Dr. Fate, who promises to help him find satisfaction with life. Now, you might think that this was the setup for some big payoff later in the show. Pairing one of the most significant scientific creations with the Master of Magic could lead to something significant. But instead, the partnership goes nowhere. Ultimately, the return was the crescendo of his story. Sure, he does appear again. Amazo takes up residence in Fate's Tower alongside Hawkgirl and Aquaman, and when Solomon Grundy is unintentionally resurrected, Amazo tries to help. However, he learns that his powers are actually fueling Grundy. Chaos magic feeds upon him, and so he flees while he tries to think of a solution. I think that this is indicative of the fact that the writers were unintentionally writing themselves into a corner. Not through weak writing, I should add, but by an idea that scales faster than the story around them. Amazo had evolved from a copycat android into something functionally omnipotent, and with that evolution comes a shift in genre. He stops being a character you can fight and becomes a character you have to think about. The difficulty is that the show itself is built on conflict, resolution, and momentum. Amazo, as he was, didn't really fit that structure anymore. Once he reaches that level of power, you can't threaten him, you can't outmatch him, and, crucially, you can't resolve his story through action. It becomes philosophical, which is why The Return is such an engaging episode. Amazo's personal quest can't wrap up in a 22-minute episode without either simplifying it or betraying what makes the character interesting. So the series did the only thing it really could. It let him drift away, rather than having some dissatisfying conclusion. And while Amazo never appeared again in Justice League Unlimited, that doesn't mean that he was forgotten. In 2021, DC Comics published Justice League Infinity, a comic book continuation of the animated universe co-written by Justice League Unlimited producer James Tucker and J.M. DeMatteis. The series reveals that Amazo continued travelling the cosmos searching for meaning, and that search eventually led him to a strange mirrored realm between realities, where he unknowingly weakened the barrier between universes and triggered a multiversal crisis. Whoops. At the centre of it all is another Amazo, an alternate version fused with the anti-life equation, and the contrast between them both is pretty clear. Our Amazo still questions himself and searches for understanding. This counterpoint represents the opposite: absolute certainty. He believes he's already found meaning through domination and control after annihilating his own universe. And this is an important moment for Amazo. For the first time, he gets to see his own potential future as a despot. The parallel Amazo is so convinced that he understands existence that he no longer questions anything at all, and he has all of the wrong answers. And ultimately, that's why Amazo rejects him. Even with the power to reshape reality itself, he refuses to impose meaning onto others. Instead, he restores his corrupt counterpart free from the anti-life equation and offers him the same freedom that was given to him, the chance to search for purpose on his own terms. And the two head off into the multiverse to discover the unknown. And I think that really is the perfect ending for Amazo. His story has never really been about the power he possesses. It was more about his curiosity and accepting that life's biggest questions may never have final answers. The irony at the heart of Amazo is that he was a machine created to imitate the metahumans, but he ends up experiencing one of the most deeply human struggles imaginable. He searches the universe for someone who can tell him what his purpose is, only to realise that no such answer exists, not from Ivo, not from Luthor, not even from Dr. Fate. Meaning is not something waiting to be discovered, it's something you create for yourself, and that's why Amazo ultimately rejects domination and control. Despite having the power to reshape reality itself, he chooses curiosity over certainty. The search becomes more important than the answer. And I think the most important thing we can learn from Amazo is that uncertainty is not weakness. He never finds a perfect answer to life's biggest questions, but he keeps searching anyway. He accepts that meaning is something personal and unfinished, not a final destination waiting at the end of the road. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time, I'll be back with a new video on Monday. With the impending release of the Supergirl film, what better time is there to talk about the Superman the Animated Series two-parter, The Main Man? And yeah, next Friday I'll make the video that you were probably expecting me to make. Yes, let's talk about Supergirl and the weight of expectation. Hope to see you then.